This morning, I read the quick start rules for Dragonbane from Free League Publishing. This game is currently live on Kickstarter and is doing very well. While reading the rules, I kind of started feeling that this would be a great set of rules for solo gaming, and I wanted to share my thoughts in this video. So let's get into this. Welcome to Solitary RPG. As you can see, I'm using a copy of the Quick Start rules that you can get from the Kickstarter page free. These rules are not set in stone, so anything that are in the Quick Start rules may not make it in the final edition of the game. But so far, everything I'm seeing in the rules, I really like. However, I just have a black and white copy, and I don't feel that it's going to do justice to the game. So what I'm going to do is switch over to my desktop and actually show the PDF in full color. So let's take a flip through of Dragonbane, the quick start rules. First couple pages going to give you a little bit of a background, and then it's going to jump right into kind of what an RPG is and things that you'll need, like a game master and getting started. And then it jumps into your characters, just starts talking about the different layout on the character sheets and everything that you have going on. They use kin in here, and the kin types that they have is you have human, halfling, dwarf, elf, mallard, and wolfkin. And each kin has innate abilities that are unique to that kin, and they can either adjust your attribute or you have access to certain skills, which, it's pretty standard stuff. I'm not going to dive into all the specifics. Please download the rules, read the rules. I want to approach this from a solo gaming aspect and kind of the ease and simplicity of these rules and what I like about them from that perspective. First thing I want to touch base on with your character creation is in the upper right hand corner. They talk about memento. This is if you're followed Geek Gamer's YouTube channel for any length of time. She talks a lot about trinkets, same concept, something that has sentimental value to you, something you always carry, something that can bring back memories, whatever. It's a trinket. But in this game, you can actually use it to recover additional conditions during a stretch rest, which is described on page 18. So now, instead of it just being a narrative component to your character sheet, you can actually use that in your game session to help your character recover. I really like the fact that that has been brought into this rule system. I don't know if that's new or if that's something that has always been in this. From what I understand, this game is based off a Swedish RPG that has been around since the 80s. And I don't know if that was part of the original rules, but it's here now for us to enjoy. Gear, encumbrance. You can carry a number of items equal to half your strength rounded up. Just that simple. And your weapons at hand, your helmet, armor, and shield are not part of your encumbrance. Those are separate items. You can have up to 3 weapons at hand, which means like a sword or a knife or axe, stuff that's like strapped to belts, things of that nature. They're at your ready. Same thing with your helmet, armor, and shields. They're worn. They're not tracked as part of your encumbrance. They're all different and handled differently. Encumbrance is carries on onto page 6, but before we jump over to that page, I want to talk about measuring time since we're on this page right now. I think this is a very straightforward system for measuring time. A round is 10 seconds, a stretch is 15 minutes, which, a stretch can be anything from exploring a room or taking a stretch rest. And then a shift is a 6-hour period. So basically, you can hike 15 kilometers or you can take a shift rest. And that's it. Hopefully, in the main rules, they may go a little bit more into this, give you some better examples of things that you can do just to help with gameplay. But they give you this quick chart just to help you. Tracking time for me, or measuring time for me in my solitary games or my solo games, it's always a challenge. I forget to do it, but it's nice that they include this little chart. Now we'll go to page 6 and we'll continue talking about encumbrance. And here, arrows, sling stones. If you have a quiver, you just have arrows. It takes up one spot. You don't count each arrow as an item. You got a quiver, it's full of arrows. You got a pouch full of sling stones. That's it. You can track the number of arrows that you have if you want. That's nothing really in the rules that there's no equipment list or anything like that. So it could just be easily said that you just have arrows. But then we get into heavy items. So some items you may pick up might be heavier, and you just give them a weight value, 2, 3, 4, so on, and they would just take up that many number of spots that you're allowed to take. So if you're allowed 8 spots, you got 4 items, and you pick up a heavy item that is heavy 3, that's 3 more spots, so now you're at 7 spots. That's how that works. Tiny items, this is neat. Tiny items aren't tracked, so they give you a kind of a measurement of what a tiny item is if it fits in a closed fist. So if it doesn't fit in a closed fist, it's not a tiny item. So if you found a ring, then that doesn't count. You don't track it, you just list it someplace else on your character sheet. It doesn't go on your equipment list or your encumbrance list. You just have a tiny item. Coins are the same way. If you have under 100 coins, that's just considered a tiny item that doesn't take up any spot on your encumbrance list. But then if you go above 100, anywhere from 100 to 199, that's 1 item. 200 to 299, that's 2 items, so on and so on. I like that. And you can carry more if you so desired. And all you got to do is, if you're going to make any kind of a move action, like in combat, or you're going to hike or walk around, you have to make a strength check first. If you pass, go about your day. If you fail, you have to make decisions. Do I drop some stuff? Or do you stop and you wait, and maybe you redistribute your items with other characters if there's people with you? If not, you may just have to leave some of that gold behind for somebody else to find. But yes, so the encumbrance system is very, very slick, very straightforward, especially in these quick start rules. I'm hoping this kind of carries over into the main rules and they don't make it overly complicated for encumbrance. Rolling dice. This game system is going to use all the dice that we love to use. So you're going to have the D4s on up to the D20s, but it's primarily going to be a D20 system. They don't use critical failures or critical successes. They actually call a critical success, they call it rolling a dragon. It's a roll under system. So if you roll a 1 on your D20, you've rolled a dragon. And depending on what you're using that roll for, if it's in combat, it can do additional damage. If it's something outside of combat, you just do a little narrative explanation, and you may get a little more. For solo gaming, we're used to this. It's that yes and or no and concept, and we're used to adding that narrative to our dice rolls. Failing, they call it rolling a demon, which it's cool to give it kind of a cool name instead of just critical failure, critical success, which is neat. And then you have boons and banes. This is kind of like advantage, disadvantage. You're just rolling 2 dice and going forward, and it gets a little bit more into detail, but I'm not going to talk too much about that. Only one chance. I like this rule. What it's talking about is when you roll, let's say, to unlock a door, and you roll and you fail, you can't just have another character try again, or you can't just try again. You need to try something different, or you have to wait till the circumstances change so that you can go about it a different way. I like this. It's going to help drive your narrative in solo gaming, that you only have the one chance to unlock the door. So it fails. Oh, now what do I do? Well, I have to get through the door. So now we're going to smash it down, and that will change your narrative, your story, what your gameplay during your session, because smashing the door down obviously makes noise, which can attract attention to you, which you may not want in a situation. So I like this. Now we're gonna move on, but before I move on, I want to talk about the if you get these PDF, these green boxes, this green blocks of text. These are optional rules. It talks about it here in the upper left-hand corner, optional rules. You don't have to do them if you don't want to. But so far, everything I read in the optional rules, I'll probably be using. I really think a lot of these optional rules add to the gameplay, and for solo play, gives you a lot of options that you can use. But let's jump into opposed roles. So, we're used to doing opposed roles, but I like what they do with these rules, the little bullet points or diamond points. They talk about if your roll fails, your action fails, regardless of what your opponent rolls. So if you're trying to, their example, if you're trying to sneak past a watchful guard and you do an opposed roll and you fail and the guard fails, doesn't matter, you fail, because you failed the sneak portion of it, the attribute or the skill, the thing that you were trying to accomplish. So the roll isn't necessarily just a rolling of the dice, it's also kind of like an attribute check as well. If your roll succeeds and your opponent fails, then your action succeeds. That's pretty straightforward. If you both succeed with your rolls and your actions succeed, if your success is higher than the opposed roll success, then you fail. So it's a neat little take on doing those opposed rolls, where it's not, yes, we're doing opposed roll. I succeed and you succeed, but you succeed better than I do, so the roll fails. And it's really, um, if you're doing an action with it. And I think most opposed roles are going to have some sort of action associated with it. I know that's primarily, I don't do many opposed roles where there's not an action of either persuasion or doing something, trying to trick someone into changing their way of thinking or whatever. So I like that. I like how it breaks it down a little bit further than just a simple roll. And then you can push the roll if you want. So if you fail and you want to push it, you can. This is the optional rule, and I like it, especially with solitary play or solo play. Sometimes you may want to push some of those rolls, take some chances, because you're trying to drive that story, and it's normally just one or two characters that you're playing with. So you may want to push some of these rolls just to get things happening. But if you do push a roll, you have to take a condition. So what is a condition? It's really a narrative thing that you're going to be adding to your character. So under your attributes, there are conditions like, dazed for strength, sickly for constitution, exhausted for agility, angry for intelligence, scared for willpower, dirty for charisma. But you have to you kind of play that out, and you have to tie it into your story, and it's just kind of cool. It's a good narrative element to a game. I like it. And then as you go down, you got healing conditions. So you can recover from a condition by resting, stretch rest, which we talked about under times. It can heal a condition of your choice. And then if you, once per gaming session, use your memento, you can heal another condition. So kind of cool. NPCs and monsters, only the player characters can push their rolls. NPCs and monsters cannot. So straightforward stuff. And then in the other optional rule, help from others. Pretty straightforward. If you've got an NPC with you, they can help you with your dice rolling, depending on what you're doing. So you'd have to look at the narrative, but it's pretty straightforward that the individual helping you must be physically present and have the capability to support your action. And obviously, as a solo player, you would have final say in that. And if someone is going to help you, basically, in the example, they talk about a combat action, someone's helping you. you would get that extra dice. You would roll a boon for that action. So combat and damage. Free League is really big into using cards for initiative action, and nothing's going to change here. They're still going to have the cards. So at the start of any type of a combat situation, you're going to draw cards. The lowest number goes first, and the highest number goes last. And that's kind of how you do your initiative. If you don't want to use cards, it's a 1 through 10, so you can always just roll d10s. And if you get ties, then you would just either re-roll the ties, or maybe you would just narratively say the PC goes first in a tie situation only, and just work it out that way. That's up to you. But that's kind of what they have that goes on here. The lowest one goes first and the highest one goes last. Initiative for NPCs. To make things simpler, particular in large battles, the GM can draw a single initiative card for a group of NPCs. All NPCs in that group act at the same turn. Again, as solo gamers, we're used to that concept because we may do that just naturally through gameplay. And then for surprise, if you're going to surprise your enemy, then you can just choose when you're going to go. You would just pick the card number that you want. So if you want to go first, you would just draw that card. So that's how that works. And then you have waiting. Again, an optional rule where you can actually switch cards. If you have if you're running more than one character, you can switch those cards around if you want, because maybe you don't want your ranged combat to go first, or you do want your ranged combat to go first, depending on how far away your target is. So you can make some adjustments with that, and you can also switch with the monsters or the encounters. If you want to, let's say the monster is going to go first and you want to go first, you can switch with them. But the challenge with the monsters is monsters are probably going to have more than one initiative card. And we'll talk about this as we move through the rules. And you wouldn't want to always give yourself that advantage. The GM would naturally choose which card. You may just want to do a roll to see which card the monster will switch, if that is the way you're going to go. But it's a neat concept. I like it because it breaks up the initiative order a little bit so that you can narratively talk about the game or move the game forward. And then we got actions and movement in combat. This is pretty straightforward stuff. I don't think we need to dive into it too much. If you've been playing RPGs for any length of time, you should be pretty familiar with this. But basically, you in combat, you can take a free action, and then you take your normal action or a reaction to what's going on in the combat, and it lays it out pretty nicely. And again, I don't think I need to talk too much about that. But then we get into melee. So here in the melee portion of it, it dives into how melee works and the different things. And then you also have some optional rules listed in here. Long weapons. Basically, a long weapon just gives you, obviously, more distance between you and the encounter. They say up to 4 meters. One of the things on the other side, on where it talks about the map, if you're using grid maps, they do talk about meters as being, like the grids. And 2 meters, you need to be next to each other. So 4 meters, you can be a little bit further apart for that long weapon. Dragon rolls when parrying. So parrying is one of your reactions, and the reason it's in the rules is monsters always hit in this game. Monsters don't roll to hit. They just automatically hit, and you have to respond to that. And parrying is one of your responses. And if you roll a dragon when parrying, you immediately perform a counterattack on your opponent. So if you go to parry and you roll that dragon, you get an immediate counterattack. Kind of cool. Damage types up here, another optional rule. There are 3 types of damage: slashing, piercing, and bludgeoning. Some weapons, such as swords, can inflict both smashing damage and piercing damage. You must state whether you are going to stab or slash before rolling the dice. The damage type influences the effectiveness of the armor, and monsters can be resistant to certain types of damage. Then you get into ranged combat. We're used to it. You can, again, we got more special rules if you want to dive into it. But I want to kind of get into the damage itself, because I think the way the damage rules work are pretty cool. So if you're wearing armor in this game, armor just reduces the amount of damage. Period. End of story. Doesn't make you any harder to hit. Doesn't make it anything more. You're hit, you're taking 5 points of damage. The armor reduces 2 points of damage. You're taking 3 points of damage. And then they get into damage types and armor for a special rule. If the optional rule for damage types, page 15, which we've already passed, is used, the following rules apply. Leather and studded leather gain +2 bonus to their armor rating against bludgeoning damage. And then chainmail gets a +2 bonus to its armor rating against slashing damage. So that's why you want to talk about what type of an attack you're going to do. Again, this is all cool for narrative play and really helpful for solo gaming, because it gets you thinking about what your characters are doing instead of just saying, I swing to hit. You want to decide, well, it's got on certain type of armor. I need to attack in a certain way to make that work. Kind of neat. So you can die in this game. Yeah, most games you should be able to. That should be a real thing. So basically, if your HP reaches 0, drop to the ground and you risk dying. So what you got to do is start making death rolls. And if you are on the ground and it's your turn, you must make a death roll, a roll against your Constitution attribute. The death roll can be pushed if the optional rule is used. Record how many death rolls you make on your character sheet. After 3 successful rolls, you recover D6 HP. You do not need to make another roll. After 3 failed death rolls, your player character dies. Rolling a dragon counts as 2 successful deaths, and rolling a demon counts as 2 failures. So this is neat. Instead of you saying you're just unconscious and you've got to wait to be recovered, which sometimes in a solo gaming session, you may not have anybody to recover you. This gives you an option to keep your character alive, which is cool. However, if you suffer additional damage while 0 HP, it all automatically counts as a failed death roll. So if you're down and the creature hits you again, that is a death roll that is failed. Yeah. So it happens. So rally is kind of a cool rule, especially if you've got other characters around you. If they're within earshot, they can persuade you to get back into the fight, get on your feet, let's go, and they can rally you. You continue acting as normal, but you got to keep making the death rolls as described above. So this is like in the movies, we've seen the character get all beat up and they're down and out, and they rally back up and they continue going forward. And if you make your successful death rolls, you're good. If you don't, after your 3rd failure, you're dead. So it's a neat concept. It come in handy, especially if you have other characters that you're playing with, to keep everyone going. Saving a life. If you have 0 HP, another person can save your life, doing a healing roll. This counts as an action. If the roll is successful, stop making death rolls and recover D6 HP. I like it. But now let's talk about instant death. So this can happen, an instant death in this game, which is narratively just a cool concept. You don't record negative HP, but if you have a single attack that reduces your HP to a negative score equal to your full HP, your character instantly dies. Time to honor the fallen adventure and create a new one. So it's a neat thing to have in a rule system where a character can have an instant death, especially if they do something stupid, which we're solo players. We usually don't do a lot of stupid things, but you never know. You may try something extremely risky, like trying to fight a dragon by yourself, which would be stupid. And again, if they hit you hard enough and they take you down to a negative value that would be equal to your HP, you're just instantly dead. Boom, there you go. In the bottom box there, it talks about 0 HP for NPCs. Again, this is, they don't do the death rolls. I guess if it's your game, if you wanted to do the death rolls, that would be up to you. However, you just decide if they live or die, and they can have instant death. So I talked about conditions earlier. Again, this kind of talks about it a little bit more. In the game, you can suffer different conditions. Each condition gives you a Bane on a roll against certain attributes and skills. So if you have a condition on strength, you're going to get a Bane roll, which is basically a disadvantage. Suffering conditions, you want to make these thematic. So if you're dazed, you want to work that into your story until you recovered that condition, and you choose them. So that's a neat concept. Some things in the rules may tell you you have to take a dazed condition for strength, but if you already have it, you have to choose a different one. So you can have multiple. You can have you can have conditions on all your attributes, um, but if you already have a condition and you can't pick it multiple times. And then healing conditions. Again, we talked about this during a stretch rest. A shift rest, which is the long rest, will heal all your conditions. So it gives you narratively, you can push your rolls, take conditions, but you can recover these conditions easily, especially with the memento. If you're taking just a quick rest, but if you're taking a shift rest, a long rest, you can recover all of your conditions, which is cool. And then it gets into healing and resting. Again, just talking a little bit more about those things. So a stretch rest is just the short rest. We've already kind of touched about it, and you can heal D6 HP or 2d6 HP if someone else is tending to you and succeeds with a healing roll. So it's kind of nice. During a stretchy rest, you can also recover 2d6 willpower. And willpower, we're going to talk a little bit about when we get into magic, because that is how you handle magic in this game. And then shift rest. During a shift rest, one full shift you can only take in a safe place, obviously, where no enemies are nearby. During a long rest, you recover all your HP and willpower. So pretty straightforward. Spells can allow you to heal HP more quickly as usual. So, and again, it's such a simple, straightforward way of writing the rules, and I like this. I appreciate this. And then we get into other hazards. Don't really need to talk too much about it, but I do like the fear table. I like how fear is actually something that you can roll on that can have an effect in the game and just makes it a little bit more thematic, and it kind of breaks it down. There are many horrifying beasts lurking in the ruins and forests of Dragonbane. Such creatures can perform so-called fear attacks. So earlier when I was talking about initiative, I mentioned something about speed and how monsters can get a couple different um, initiative cards, and this is where it kind of breaks it down a little bit further. And it's their speed ability. Some monsters are so powerful that they can attack multiple times in the same round. This is indicated by their speed score. At the start of each round, the GM draws one initiative card for each point of speed. The monster can act each turn in the round with one action and one movement on each turn. So basically, if they have speed 2, they would get 2 cards, and they can um, respond during gameplay. Waiting, and we talked a little bit about this this is an optional rule. If a player character swaps initiative card, optional rule, page 11, with a monster, the player character chooses one of the monster's card. Monsters themselves never wait. Movement, just like players, monsters have a movement, right? So monsters attack, and this is one of the things that really makes this game shine, for me anyways, as good for solo. Monsters always use their monster's attack when it attacks. Each monster has a unique set of monster attacks, which are summarized in a table. The GM rolls or chooses the attack from the table when it's the monster's turn to attack. Monsters never roll dice to hit their target. Monster attack succeeds automatically. As a rule, monsters' attacks can be dodged but not parried. Exceptions to this rule are stated in the monster attack description. So what's cool about this is each monster, and when we get into the adventure for this, we'll see some monster stat blocks. They have certain attacks, and you can just roll, and that's the attack. So it's like a built-in AI for your monsters, and they always succeed when they roll when they attack. So you just have to respond to an attack, which just makes it so much easier in a solo game because you don't have to, what's the armor class and what's this and what's that. Monsters just hit and you just respond to the hit. So if they're going first, they're going to hit, you either parry, dodge, do whatever you need to do. That's your action. And then you just continue on from there. Conditions. Monster attacks can inflict conditions. And this we already talked a little bit about. To the player characters, if the character gains a condition they already have, the player must choose another condition instead. Repeat attacks. A monster never makes the same attack twice in a row. If the GM rolls the same monster attack 2 consecutive times, the second roll changes into the attack 1 step higher on the table. So a 6 would become a result of a 1, 5 was 6, so on and so on. So I like that. So sometimes, we can get caught in that loop where we're just doing the same thing over and over again. This is going to make your combat so much more narratively driven because you're doing all the different attacks. And then you got skills, mainly used outside of combat. So these are opposed roll skills. You're not going to see any bonus in their attack type stuff. And then melee, dodging and parrying. Monsters can dodge if it has a skill level in mobility. Monsters carrying weapons can also parry. Each dodge or parry uses up one of the monster's actions in the round. Flip the initiative card. So even though the creatures may have like a higher speed or a speed value that's greater than 1, if they have certain things, they could use a parry or a dodge, and that just takes one of their actions. There's no rolling though; you just do it. That's just how it works. Hitting a weak spot. A piercing attack can find a gap or a weak spot in a monster's natural armor, just like a humanoid opponent. So that's kind of cool. If you're fighting like this big old spider, maybe you just get between the shell of the spider, their ectoskeleton. So you get through it and find that weak spot and cause some damage. So it's kind of cool. And then natural armors. Many monsters have some form of natural armor. This works out just like ordinary armor. So cool. Resistance to immunity. Some monsters are resistant to certain damage types. This means that all damage of this type is halved, rounded up. Some monsters can even be immune to certain types of damage and therefore take no damage from other such attacks. So there you go. And if you're trying to do some persuasion, monsters are immune to the persuasion skill unless otherwise stated. Straightforward. And then we get into the fear. Monsters are too terrifying to get scared themselves and therefore immune to fear attacks, but many of them can certainly instill terror in character players. So I really like how the creatures have all this stuff built into their behaviors through the stat blocks. I hope the bestiary for this game has a lot of great creatures or monsters that we can encounter with some fun attacks and just things that can happen. And then we get into magic. And I'm hoping that as we're flipping through the pages, you're seeing the amazing art and why I felt a black and white copy would not do this game justice. This art is just amazing. And this magic piece here, like that would just be a great poster in my game room. So using magic. So we have different types of magic. First of all, schools of magic are broken down. There are 3 schools described in the core game, which are listed here, but you use your willpower to cast magic, which I like because it's a resource. You don't have to memorize spells. You don't have to do any kind of a reading of a scroll or anything. If you have the magic, you use the magic, you use up your willpower. When your willpower is used up, you're out of magic. So sorcerers cast spells by using their mental strength, represented by their willpower points. And when we get to a character sheet, you'll see that. Your maximum number of willpower points equals your willpower attribute. So there you go. Those are tied together. Willpower points are willpower points are spent when casting spells. As a rule, casting a spell costs 2 willpower points per level, while lesser magic tricks below cost 1. So there you go. When you run out of willpower, you cannot cast more spells until you have recovered. So you can also, that's neat. So you have a pool, a resource. It's all the number of points you can use for casting your magic. You have tricks, you have spells, you have a value. However, if you go, if you've used up all your willpower, you have power from the body. So this is kind of a cool little thing. So if you're really deep in a situation and your magic caster has used up all their willpower, they can pull from their body. If you're running low on willpower points, you can draw power from your body if you need be. But this is harmful, potentially even lethal. Roll a dice of your choice, and they list all the dice that you can roll before casting a spell. The result indicates how many willpower you gain and can be used straight away, but you also take the same amount of damage. If you reach 0 HP because of the damage, well, you know what happens. You collapse after you cast the spell. So this is just a neat concept. It's a resource that if you really need that extra willpower because whatever you're doing, roll the dice. How many willpower points do you need to get through this situation? So you're kind of, you may need to roll that d20 if the situations is just that bad, or you may just need a couple extra willpower points because maybe the creature's on the cusp of dying, and you just need to get off that one more spell, and you roll your d4 and you get the extra points, and boom, you end the creature. So it's kind of cool. I like it. It's a neat little resource management that you get to build into the game. So using magic. Magic tricks, so-called magic tricks, are minor, relatively harmless spells. So they're kind of like fun. They only cost 1 willpower point. And then you got your regular casting of spells, which cost the 2 willpower points. Hopefully when you get the main rules, obviously we'll get a better look at all the different spells. But we get some here to look at. And then magic and iron. So this is a neat concept, and I've never really had this come up in a rule system before, but I'm not well versed in all of the different rules. Iron has an anti-magic effect, which means that you cannot use magic while in direct contact with iron or steel, except for a tiny item. That's just cool. So you can't build that magic caster with the two-handed greatsword because they're touching iron. I would assume even if the handle's wrapped in leather, the concept would still be the same. But also environmentally, like if you're just in a certain situation where maybe you got iron handcuffs on, that's something in the world, like magic users are hunted down and they put iron handcuffs on them so you can't use magic. So it's a neat little concept in the game. Just a few little lines, but so much narrative information provided. And then you got requirements. So the requirements are kind of cool. So what type of a spell is it? Is it a word spell? The spell is activated with a chant or power word. Is it a gesture? Do you got to wave your hands around in a certain movement? Is it a focus? The spell is activated with the item held in your hand, such as a staff or a wand. Or is it ingredients? Do you have to have some sort of a mixture of ingredients, like a potion or something like that, to make your spell go off? And those are actually listed in the spells. So if we look on the other side, we have some basic spells to look at. You got tricks, which ignite. You light or extinguish a candle, torch, or lantern within 10 meters. It's pretty tricky. But then you get into Fireball. So here we got Fireball, which has a requirement. It's word, gesture. Then you get into your time. How much time does it take? It's an action, so combat type stuff. Range 20 meters, duration instant. So, and then it gets into the attack. And each power level beyond the first increases the damage by d6 or creates another fireball that hits another target within range. So you got some usage for the fireball. So this is just a neat little narrative thing that I think works good in for solo playing because it gets you thinking about the spell and maybe your character, what they say, and it just adds to your narrative to the game. So then after Magic, you get into the adventure that comes along with the game. Uh, pretty good stuff here. You got your situation, you got some random events, you got some locations that you get to roll on. Um, we're used to this kind of stuff. But here we got the giant spider. So I wanted to take a closer look at the monster blocks or stat blocks for the monsters so that you can get a better feel for some of the behaviors that they can have. So here's a giant spider. Speed 2, which means they'll get 2 initiative cards. Move 24, armor rating zip, HP 50. That's all your stats. And then you have a d6 for their attacks. So these are all the different attacks that they can take. You got a scratch attack. Giant spider throws itself at the player characters, attacking with multitude of hairs, so barbed legs. So this tarantulas have that hair on them that makes you itching. That's what itching powder is made out of. Everyone within 2 meters suffers D8 slashing damage. So if your armor, gives you a benefit from slashing damage, this is why you have to describe what you're doing. And this says slashing damage. You would get that if it can resist that slashing damage, you would get the benefit that goes with it, and that's kind of neat. So I like how they work. And again, this is where you roll the d6, pick your attack, and then move forward with your gameplay, which I really just like how that works. It's that built-in AI. You don't have to figure out. Sometimes playing some of the games that I play, the creatures have multiple different attacks, and sometimes you kind of get lost and you just you get that rut going. You're like, oh, they're gonna bite, they're gonna kick, they're gonna do whatever, and you just get caught in that rut. This doesn't allow that. This is why I think this game is really great for solo gaming. This takes that takes it out of the equation. You roll, this is what they do, and you can't do the same one twice. So there you go. So the adventure goes on. This is where all the creatures are listed for this quick start rules. This is just a simple adventure. So then the adventure goes on. You're coming across some bats. So this is one of those examples which was talked about earlier in the rules, where the GM would just draw one initiative card for a group of creatures or monsters, and this is an example of that. Because if you were to come across this, there's going to be like 100 bats, but they swarm together and attack as one. So they have speed 3, so they get 3 attacks, movement 24, armor rating 0, hit points 24. So you treat it as one creature, but they attack as together as one, and they get they still get their 3 initiative card for their speed. And you also notice here they only have 3 attacks. So it's very easy that if they're just attacking, you're going to get one of each. So that's the bats, and then the story continues on. Again, great little scenario with lots of information in it. And then you got the lady, which is a ghost, so a little bit different. This one actually has some cool skills attached to it. So the ghost is speed 2, movement 12, armor rating 0, HP 27. Immunity. Ghosts are undead creatures and therefore immune to all damage except magic and fire. A defeated ghost is only banished for 1 shift, after which it returns. So it tells you right off the bat, my warrior with the sword isn't going to be able to do anything with a ghost. And I'm just kind of going to have to evade or do whatever I can to get away from the ghost. And then they're persuadable. So this, now my warrior has a chance. I could do an opposed roll, impossible to persuade the ghost, but with a penalty. So there you go. Then it just goes on from there with the adventure to the end, and then we get into our character sheets. So this is all you need for your character sheet. It's pretty straightforward. All of them are the same. There's not a different one for magic casters and anything like that. So up in the top, you've got your basic information, your kin, your age, your profession, and your motivation. And then you have your appearance, which is all fun stuff. And then you got your name and your stats. So, and then underneath the stats are those conditions that we've talked about throughout the rules with dazed and sickly and exhausted and angry and scared and dirty, that kind of stuff. Then you get into all your bonuses. They're all pretty straightforward. What you move, your inventory slots. When we talked about inventory, it was half your strength rounded up. Strength here is 10. He's got 5. So he can carry 5 things. Just that simple. Then down at the bottom of your inventory, you have your momentum, worn diary full of your experiences and discoveries. So that's pretty cool. Then under that, you get into your tiny items. So if you have any small things that you want to carry, such as right below that, your money. This character has 7 silver. And then on the left side, you've got your abilities and spells. These are from, we don't have full character generation for this game yet, so don't know how all this came to be. These are all pre-gens. When we get the main rules, we'll get all of that. But you have your spells, and then you have your skills in the middle. The bottom left, you have your willpower points and your hit points. So if you look here, the willpower of this character is 19. Now, when I was talking earlier, your agilities or your attributes were 3 to 18. Well, this is 19. Obviously, there's a problem here. Not necessarily, because this is a wizard. They actually get a willpower bonus to their character generation. So that's how the character got to 19. And then you have your little pips to fill in when you start tracking your use of your willpower points. Same thing with hit points. Hit points come from your constitution. And there you go. And then you have your weapons down below, all broken down what they can do. Bludgeoning is the damage type for the staff. Then obviously this character has no armor because as we learned, iron is bad for magic. So they don't want any metal on them. And then the next page, so this talks about the character itself. So here, willpower 3 points. So that's how you get your bonus to your willpower. And then magic, the wizard can use magic. Read more about magic on page 22 in the quick start rules. There's not a lot of information for the different character types in the quick start PDF. Maybe when we get the full rules, we'll get a little bit more information, but this is enough to get us started, to get a feel for the characters. So there's a little bit of stuff added in here. Again, the back of this quick start rule just gives you a bunch of pre-generated characters. This is your elf. Here you got willpower points. As an elf, you can meditate deeply during a stretch rest. You then heal an additional d6 HP and a d6 extra willpower and can recover from additional conditions. You are completely unresponsive during your meditation and cannot be awakened. So a little bit of character fluff. And then you get access to the animal kinship, willpower 3 points to use that. And it just talks a little bit more about the abilities that you can use. Kind of wanted this. Oh, now here are the duck people. The art's fantastic, by the way. This is just awesome art. But I don't play furries in my games. So if I use this, they'll just be humanoid types. That is just a personal preference. You can do whatever you want in your games. That's one of the joys of solo RPGing is you can do whatever you want. And if you don't want to use the duck people, don't use the duck people. You can just say they're humanoids, which is fine. But This gives you a little bit of they're ill-tempered, so maybe they are barbarians after all, and protectors. So they have some special abilities to be used for the gameplay. And again, I'm hoping when the main rules come out, they may expand upon this a little bit more. These are your hobbit types, halflings. They're hard to catch. Of course, they're hard to catch. They're halflings. You got this ability. You can activate this ability when dodging an attack, getting a boon to the mobility roll. So there you go, backstabbing. So cool stuff. And then you got the Wolfkin, the Wolf people. Neat art, just fantastic art. So, and again, just more about the character class. So that was a quick kind of flip through with some of the rules, and hopefully I highlighted some of the rules that I really feel catered to more of the solo game player, especially with the additional narrative stuff that you do during gameplay. Again, this is live on Kickstarter. You can go back it. I think it's going to be a box set game, kind of like Twilight 2000 was. I think $75, and then there'll be some additional add-ons and things like that if it's something that you're interested in. But yeah, that's Dragonbane. I'm excited to get it out. It won't be on the Kickstarter. It is August of 2023, but it's not a huge buy-in. $75 US, and it's going to come with a lot of stuff. They've already broken all the stretch goals. There's one more stretch goal, and I'm sure after that there'll be more stretch goals. I think the next stretch goal is going to unlock an adventure of some sort. So you can get the quick start rules if you just go to the Kickstarter page, link in the description below. You can download the quick start rules, take a read through them for yourself. I'm sure I didn't cover everything. I didn't get into much detail. I really just highlighted a lot of the things that I felt focused more on solo play, how it can help you with solo gaming. And really the one thing that stands out most about these rules is the AI built in for the creatures or the monsters, and how the combat works with them. It kind of keeps that combat moving in a different direction, and you have to respond differently. I like that. And that's it. So all you got to do is add an oracle to the system, and there's hundreds of different oracles out there. Just pick the one you want to answer the questions, and you're good to go. So there you go. Thank you for watching, and have a good day. Bye.